Earlier this month, I was walking in the woods when I came upon a grove of trees with beautiful white, almost silver bark and dramatically curving branches. They were sycamores. And it reminded me of this poem by Wendell Berry called The Sycamore. In the place that is my own place, whose earth I am shaped in and must bear, there is an old tree growing, a great sycamore that is a wondrous healer of itself. Fences have been tied to it, nails driven into it, hacks and whittles cut in it. The lightning has burned it. There is no year it has flourished in that has not also harmed it. There is a hollow in it that is its death, though its living brims whitely at the lip of the darkness and flows outward. Over all its scars has come the seamless white of the bark. It bears the gnarls of its history healed over. It has risen to a strange perfection in the warp and bending of its long growth. It has gathered all accidents into its purpose. It is a fact, sublime, mystical, unassailable. In all the country, there is no other like it. I recognize in it a principle that I would be ruled by. I see that it stands in its place and feeds upon it and is fed upon and is native and maker. Here ends our reading. The psychiatrist Rachel Remen confesses in her best-selling book, Kitchen Table Wisdom, that she spends an inordinate amount of time watching her cat. Maybe some of us do too. How many cat people are out here today? Yes. Yeah? Okay. What about dog people? Are there some dog people out here too? Okay. We're about evenly divided, you know. Remen's cat's name is Charles. And over the years, Remen observed that Charles, like many cats, loved to hide. He'd hide beneath the couch, behind the living room drapes, in the bedroom closet, you know the places. And she noticed that when Charles was hiding, a subtle change would come over him. Instead of his usual vigilant and wary self, always looking over his shoulder, Charles in hiding would become relaxed and comfortable, at ease. One day, Remen noticed that Charles could summon this same sense of peace even when he wasn't in hiding. Turns out there was one spot, just one, on the rug in the middle of the living room where Charles would sit and kind of draw himself up with that same sense of peace and ease as he had when he was hiding. He seemed unafraid, almost as if he believed he were the only person in the room. Imagine that, a cat believing he's the only one in a room. About the same time as she made this discovery about her cat, Remen read a curious article about the tradition of bullfighting in Spain. Apparently, a bull can sometimes discover a place in the ring where he'll pause in the middle of the bullfight and seemingly summon from within himself the fullness of his strength and determination. If he finds this place, he becomes a much more dangerous opponent. So the bullfighter's job is to keep the bull from discovering this place. You know, they'll poke and they prod him and keep him moving. distract him with their colorful capes, right? Spaniards even have a name for this quasi-mystical place that a bull discovers inside the ring. They call it querencia, 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 which loosely translates as refuge or safe harbor. Now, Remen shares these stories with her reader because she believes that each of us also has a place like this. Like Charles the cat, like the bull, we have a place. Ours is inside us. A place where we can tap into an inner sense of peace and well-being and strength. We too have our querencia. It's something that Remen has discovered from decades working as a therapist with cancer patients. She's observed that sometimes her patients will rage against the disease, right? Or blame themselves, or descend into self-pity or live in denial, all of which are perfectly normal and human reactions. Yet they can also lead to more suffering, right? Over the course of their treatment, some of these patients, not all, but some, will undergo a change. They'll come to a place where they can see the disease clearly for what it is. But they have no need to hide from it or rage against it. Instead, they just face it squarely with a kind of inner strength and courage, with a sense of peace and well-being that doesn't depend on their prognosis, but seems to come from someplace deep inside them. Something inside so strong. I wonder if any of this rings true for you. Do you recognize this change that Remen describes in her patients? Have you discovered a place inside you that allows you, perhaps even for a brief moment, to move through the world with a sense of well-being and peace, with a quiet inward confidence, no matter the circumstances? How are we to understand this inner strength of ours? Where does it come from? And most importantly, how can we discover this strength now, amidst all the tumult and uncertainty in our lives and our world? Our own Unitarian tradition speaks of such a place inside us, a place of spiritual power. Emerson called it the divine spark, by which he meant a light and a warmth that radiates from within each and every one of us. That is our birthright as children of God. That is the source of our inherent worth and dignity. Every Sunday when we light our flaming chalice, we're bearing witness to that divine spark within us, that divine radiance. The poet Mark Nepo, has described quite beautifully this phenomenon. He writes, "Each person is born with an unencumbered spot, free of expectation and regret, free of ambition and embarrassment, free of worry and fear, an umbilical spot of grace where we were first touched by God. I love that line, an umbilical spot of grace. He continues, to know this place is to know who we are, not by surface markers of identity, not by where we work or what we make, but by feeling our place in relationship to the infinite, to the world, to the universe. Something inside so strong. But in order to tap into this inner strength, we must first learn to trust and believe in umbilical grace, in the divine spark. We've got to be able to rest in the assurance that we are indeed worthy and beloved, not for what we do, but simply because of who we are. And that's easier said than done. I sometimes say that we Unitarians, God bless us, are among the first to leap to the defense of another person's worth and dignity, yet often fail to believe in our own, which always breaks my heart. Because when we can trust in our own worth and dignity, our own belovedness, then we can face just about anything. When we trust this inviolable place inside us, this umbilical grace, this divine spark, we have little to fear. For we know that at some fundamental level, we're okay. We'll be okay. We're at home in our bodies, at home in the world, held. Now look, I know that no sermon can convince us that this is true. Believe me, for years I've tried and failed to preach such a sermon. In order to trust, we have to experience this place, this grace for ourselves. And the only way to do that is through practice. So I'll tell you what, I'll give you back the 15 minutes that you've spent listening to this sermon if you'll give yourself just 15 minutes every morning to sit in silence, in prayer or meditation, and allow yourself to discover and befriend that source of strength inside you. 15 minutes. There are many ways to approach that time, but it's not rocket science. One simple way to begin, when you go home today, is to simply, close your eyes and breathe. And just imagine a place where you have felt beloved and safe and at home. Notice what that place looks like, feels like, sounds like. And for a moment, with your eyes closed, just rest in that place. And notice where it takes you inside of yourself. Friends, as value propositions go, this is really a no-brainer. That 15 minutes each morning will pay you back in both short-term and lifelong dividends. allowing you to access this place of inner strength and well-being, even in the most difficult of circumstances. Look, many of the people that we love and care about are reeling these days. They're anxious and afraid for the future of our nation and our world. And when I say they, I mean we. We've been subjected to a deliberate strategy of shock and awe, a strategy designed with cruel precision to overwhelm and traumatize us. Sometimes I feel like that bull in the bull ring, distracted on one hand by the colorful cape of the toreador, and on the other lacerated by the many cuts from the picador's blade. Unable to make my way to that special place, that querencia, where I can discover my inner strength and power. Running around in circles. I'm done running. I'm done running. And I know that we can discover this place even in times like these. I know, some of you know that I began my ministry in September of 2001. Pastoring a congregation in Washington, D.C. And, the September 11 terror attacks took place just 2 days after my first sermon ever. That terrible fall, I witnessed so many acts of courage and fortitude. I'm not talking about the heroics of first responders. I'm talking about just the courage it took for normal people to live their lives in traumatic and anxious times. Right? And there's one moment from that fall that stands out for me. Some of you may remember that just a month after 9/11, D.C. experienced yet another act of terrorism. Someone started lacing our mail with the pathogen anthrax. In the end, the attack turned out to be limited, but we didn't know that then. Several people in D.C. died, including 2 postal workers who had handled contaminated pieces of mail. Their names were Thomas Morris and Joseph Curseen. I was called upon to preside at the memorial service for these 2 fallen public servants. The packed service included speeches from senators and congressmen and cabinet secretaries, but I don't remember what any of them said. What I do remember from that service was the widow of one of the men who had died, one of the postal workers. Now, I don't know what I was expecting to see in this woman. I guess I was imagining, a frail and grieving widow, someone who, on top of the traumas we'd all faced that fall, was wrecked by her own personal tragedy. But when I called her up to speak in the pulpit that morning, she approached the chancel and she climbed the stairs. It was a high pulpit like this one. She climbed the stairs, and with each step she took, she seemed to summon more strength and purpose. I'm talking about something more than mere composure. When she stepped into the pulpit, head held high, she was positively radiant. I've never seen the divine spark shine so brightly in another human being. And from that place, she spoke lovingly of her husband and hopefully about our future. And that's when I learned that even in the most challenging of times, we can discover an inner strength that will carry us through. something inside so strong, it will carry us through. I want to close with words from the French existentialist Albert Camus, who said this: "In the midst of hate, I found there was within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found there was within me an invincible joy. In the midst of chaos, I found there was within me an invincible calm. In the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. No matter how hard the world pushes against me," he said, "within me there's something stronger, something better, pushing right back." Friends, when the world is pushing up against us, may we discover the inner strength, the inner beauty, the inner radiance to push right back. Amen.